Welcome. This will be my review of Star Wars Visions, which ran 2021 to this year, 2025. Possibly more seasons coming up. I'm doing a review of the first 3 seasons, and if they make more seasons and I feel I have more to say about the show, I'll at least consider making additional videos. I am not going to spoil any of the show itself. I might spoil Star Wars leading up to when the first episode premiered, though. And I think I'm going to start by just noting, I know I've said it elsewhere. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I am so glad that we're getting more diverse voices in Star Wars now. I'll admit I haven't read the books or the comics. I don't have an issue with it. Just haven't, hasn't happened. It's possible that some of those also have, but for a while, Star Wars movies and shows were something very specific. And yeah, I'm just really glad that we're getting stuff like this now. The 3 seasons add up to around 30, maybe a little less than 30 episodes total. And see, it's been a little while since I watched the first 2 seasons. Season 1, if I recall, and certainly season 3, are anime. But they do different, that's the thing. I'm not the biggest expert on anime, so I'm not going to speak authoritatively on it or anything, but I know enough to say anime isn't just one thing. And the second season, it was other, it was animation studios all over the world. If I'm recalling correctly, they even had a claymation episode, which, like, I gotta say, I miss claymation. I wish that was more, like, yeah, I don't know. I'm not gonna go off on a whole thing about it. I think it has a charm that I haven't seen replicated anywhere else. From my admittedly very limited experience, I don't want to pull an anime men and be a tourist here, but from my limited experience, it seems like with anime, there. It seems like this one utilizes a pretty decent variety of. It's possible that there's way, way more, but yeah, there's, like, you might be surprised to find out. At least in my opinion, not every single episode of this, like most of them are, but not every single episode of this is even action. Like, some of them are just, like, essentially, there are a few things that are true for every episode of this show. They are animated in some way. None of them are live action. They are set within the Star Wars galaxy, and if I recall correctly, there's an English dub for all of the ones where there are spoken lines of dialogue. Because, yes, that is true. There is at least one of these that doesn't have dialogue. I love that we're getting such, like, there's stuff in this show that I never would have thought we'd get from official Star Wars. Just like, you fire up this show, you do not know what you're gonna get next. Like, it truly is. Like, I promised myself I wasn't gonna go off on a whole thing about the bad faith criticisms of this show, but just in case anybody else has made the mistake of reading, I have to admit, I stopped reading user reviews because it's just like the anti-woke chuds poisoned the well. Like, so difficult to find good faith readings in user reviews on pages like IMDb and Metacritic, Rotten Tomatoes, which used to be, anyway. I saw at least one person claim that every episode involved a lightsaber in one way, and that's just not true. And I'm not gonna go off on some people took issue with, scientifically speaking, Star Wars has never been about science. Like, I don't know what to tell you, buddy. Like, I think you're just looking for excuses to dislike this because, I mean, yeah, it's even further out than the prequel trilogy of movies, but the prequel trilogy of movies was pretty far out, and the original trilogy as well has stuff that you wouldn't see in, if it were a documentary, and thank goodness Star Wars is not a documentary. It would take all the fun out of it. But yeah, I think instead of me going over every single aspect, I'll just blanket say there's a ton of variety here. So, for example, variety of stories, although there are definitely themes and riffs in common with the movies, there's a variety of music, of tone, of I'm not the best at talking about animation, but animation styles, there's a good variety there. If you really badly want to know a detail about that, there are other people. I'm confident there are other people who've talked in detail about the different styles, and I think every episode is TV PG. I'm impressed that it's possible some of them are not. Either way, at the risk of coming across like a freaking narc or something, I did say frickin'. I realize I'm not sure if I enunciated well enough. I didn't, but yeah, right. This video is also rated TV PG. And I guess at this point, I don't have to say that I absolutely love this show. I absolutely, every episode was amazing. But I'm amazed that they were able to get away with some of the stuff they got away with on TV PG. At the risk of being a narc, if you are a parent, I'm not saying don't show it to kids, but maybe watch. It's not a ridiculously long show. There's a couple of episodes, at least, that I would say I would not show to a child personally. But, I'm not telling a parent what to do. I'm just, giving you fair forewarning. Let's see. But I wouldn't really say that it gets gratuitous in the, like it feels like it's trying to communicate something when it shows something very like, boundary pushing in one way or another. The voice acting is great. And I think that might more or less... So I mentioned that it riffs on, characters and scenarios and such. I personally never felt like it was just playing it safe. It felt more like, okay, these are stories that they wanted to tell. And some of the stories are very, very different from what we've seen. And I thought they did a pretty good job of covering, there's stories about Jedi, there's stories about smugglers, bounty hunters, I felt they did a really solid job of covering different aspects. And a couple of things that I understand will bother some people. This is less a show, like serialized, and more like I call it a show and episodes because that's easier for me to discuss instead of constantly saying, but technically this is more a bunch of short films with very little in the form of like follow-up stories and such. Right now I actually forget if, yeah, I'm sure you're gonna ask someone who has a better memory than me if there even are follow-up stories or not in this. If I understand correctly, there's at least one show coming up that's going to use one of the shorts here as a pilot. But that's one thing. Another is canonically, like, I would say this is basically like stuff that maybe happened kind of off screen from the adventures we're familiar with, but don't expect familiar faces as such. It's more some of the archetypes are recognizable Star Wars, And right, and I just gotta say, one thing that especially bugs me about, people say, oh, how can you let, these Japanese people, change Star Wars? First of all, no one's changing anything. This is not the status quo. They're not like they've been doing um they've been making very varied shows in recent years in general. There's a Star Wars for anyone by now, and I think that's great. It used to be that there was an element of every Star Wars movie for everyone. That's still the case. But now you have entire stories, entire shows that are very much for specific, people or groups of people. And yeah. Another thing is George Lucas did take inspiration from East Asian, among others, cultures. Like I believe he himself has straight admitted, oh yeah, like his camera, is like Akira Kurosawa's camera, like and that's very much like if you haven't already, treat yourself. Seven Samurai really is a masterpiece, and it's very plain to see that Lucas took inspiration from, I mean, that's one of the things we love about Star Wars. For the original trilogy, Lucas basically took everything that he thought would be cool and fun to combine and put them all in one movie and then one trilogy of movies. Yeah. I think that pretty much sound work is also on point. The sound design, like, holy crap. I'm amazed at yeah, and the choreography is incredible. The cinematography and editing are just spectacular. Like maybe it's wrong for an anime tourist to say, but like they're really I've never seen anything that is quite like anime. I think I will watch more. I'm not promising I'll do videos on more because I have not watched anywhere near as much anime as, like, for example, American movies. I feel like I'm such uncultured swine, but I have watched a decent amount of European, it's just mostly live action. But yeah, I think that does cover everything. Yeah. Right, one of the benefits of this is since it's not particularly serialized, you can just, like if you already have Disney Plus, I'm not sure I would necessarily say, oh, get Disney Plus for this, unless you're also gonna watch other Star Wars. You know, if you want access to all the movies, for example, Disney Plus works for that. But if you have Disney Plus, you can just go and see if the plot, you know, like each episode, there's a sentence or two or something about like, this is what this episode's about, you know. Read some of those, find one that, you know, appeals to you, watch that one, and then if you feel like it, watch more. Or if you read all of them and nothing sounds appealing to you, that's fine too. You know, I'm not saying this is for absolutely everyone. I know people who love Star Wars, but, you know, the they're just not the biggest fans of animation, and yeah, that's perfectly fine. You know, this isn't made for everyone who loves Star Wars. Yeah, I think that covers everything that I wanted to say. Yeah, I rate this 8 compelling stories, gorgeously animated, set within the Star Wars galaxy, out of 10.